If you're among my most ancient subscribers, you'll remember a video in 2021 where I said that I hated dragons.
Even a flump is cooler than a dragon.
While I have since lost my hate for dragons, I still find they are overrepresented in fantasy. They are everywhere. They're always the most loved creature in fantasy stories. Whole franchises are built upon the fact that dragons exist. It's basically its own subgenre of fantasy. No, this is to the point where most people won't consider your book a fantasy book if it doesn't have dragons in it. But why? Why of all the fantasy trends to have existed, dragons never die? Well, they do die in the stories, but dragons as a concept never dies. In this video, I'm answering the age-old question. What's with all the dragons? Now, to start with...
Amy!
We need to talk first about what,
Amy!
Who said my name? Who's talking to me in an adorable voice?
On your left, Amy! Over here!
There is nobody on my left.
Yes, it is! There's me! Pick me up over here!
Wait, my 3D printed dragon can talk?
That's right! I'm Biv, the keeper of creatures!
Oh, Biv, I see! Every dragon has a horde, and your horde is information on creatures.
No, not all dragons!
Wait, really?
Yep, though you keep playing them games featuring dragons who each do have a horde depending on their colour, that is just one of many interpretations of dragons across the world. Nearly every mythos on Earth has a different dragon-like creature, from Apophis in Egyptian myth to the Welsh red dragon and even the Talifa.
Oh yeah, the giant water serpent in Maori mythology. But wait, those dragons are all so different.
Exactly, Amy. The wisdom I can offer you as you work out why dragons are everywhere in fantasy stories today is this. Work out why they're everywhere in the world.
I see. Thank you, Biv. And welcome to the channel. I'm sure that you can offer me much wisdom going forward about creatures around this world.
We'll be down first and we'll talk when this video's over.
Okay, maybe a good place to start then, if we take Biv's advice, is to work out what a dragon actually is. Defining dragons. We might as well start off with the etymology of the term dragon. The English name for dragon comes from the Greek word drakon, which was used for any large serpent. Dragons also had a similar counterpart called wyverns, which, according to Jess Zafaris of uselessmythology.com, is derived from the Old French word for snake and the Latin word for viper. So it seems that these terms are just general terms for any snake-like or reptilian creature, which can and also cannot apply across cultures. For example, lung was the term for dragon in Mandarin Chinese, but shi means snake in the same language, so they had separate words for dragon versus snake. This is more difficult to work out the etymology of, however, because I only speak English fluently, and it's very much European languages that have etymology studied upon from what I could find. But most cultures seem to link words at least by etymology from dragon to being snakes. But a lot of these dragons don't look like snakes to me. Sure, some of the dragons out there had snake-like bodies, but when did snakes get wings? When did snakes get legs? When did they have wings with hands on the end of them? Or fire-breathing abilities? Or ways to control the weather? The only thing that seems to link dragons from around the world together is their snake and reptile rooted names. While we're at it, I think we should talk about the common ways that dragons are depicted around the world now. European dragons. The European archetype of dragons is one of the most well-known depictions that we see today. It makes sense, colonization and all that. Plus, it's literally on the Welsh flag. I would very much rather have a dragon on my country's flag than the flag of another country. Europe's dragons were considered evil creatures, destructive in nature. Christianity even regarded dragons as creatures of sin. Some could fly, breathe fire, or poison. Some were greedy and would have hoards of wealth, and yet the crown wasn't villainized in such ways for appearing to do the same, hoarding their wealth. Dragons were the kinds of creatures in Europe that often heroes would go out and slay, and their tales would be found in poetry of the Middle Ages and other tales, such as St. George, a knight of Christian legend. A dragon in his village requested items for a hoard or for food, which, when times turned rough on the village, included humans. When a princess was to be the next victim, St. George slew the dragon to rescue her. Arthurian legend also featured dragons, with knights Tristram and Lancelot each slaying a dragon to win the favor of different kings. And Merlin also had a prophecy which saw two dragons fighting each other as like a vision thing. Dragons also appeared on heraldry during the Middle Ages to strike fear into enemies' hearts and portray the army that they were representing as a powerful army. Due to how dragons were so prominent in the Middle Ages, it makes sense why they have appeared so much in high fantasy. It's a popular period of history to draw fantasy from, and they often chose creatures within them. But it wasn't just in Great Britain and Ireland that we saw dragons. Greek myth included dragons or creatures that were dragon-like in nature, like the multi-headed Hydra or the dragon that guarded the Golden Fleece. People suspect that these Greek myths actually inspired Christian legends involving dragons. Asian dragons. On the other side of the Eurasia supercontinent, dragons were the friends of many Asian cultures. China was the main culture in Asia where dragons were depicted, and a lot of other mythologies and surrounding countries took on inspiration from Chinese mythology. So Chinese mythology and Chinese dragons will be the main focus of this section. The dragon still had a snake-like body and could fly like the European dragon. However, it did not need wings to fly. And it had a head which may be described as being a horse-like head. Where Europe associated dragons with fire, Asia associated them with water. This included both the rivers and the rain. China held dragons to a particularly high standard, it being one of their zodiac animals. In a race which determined which order the Chinese zodiac animals would appear in the calendar, the dragon was expected to come first, being such a powerful creature. However, it came fifth in the calendar instead. This is because the dragon saw that a village was on fire and needed to use its rain powers to be able to save it from the fires. And it also assisted a struggling creature across the finish line, which I believe was the rabbit. So not only were these powerful creatures, but these were also creatures of great virtue. The Emperor of China was considered to have a strong connection with dragons, and their robes were often decorated with motifs of them. In some legends, emperors were born with dragon birthmarks. This was regardless of whether it was linear or not. It was the sign of a truly great emperor to have a dragon birthmark on you, even if you were born from common blood. This connection with dragons and royalty was also seen in Mesopotamian legends and West Asian cultures. The Chinese-inspired dragons were also seen in other West Asian cultures with some differences. Korean dragons were also associated and good symbols of agriculture, as well as water. And all Vietnamese people were said to have descended from dragons, not just their royalty. This good and nature-centric dragon also appears in Polynesian culture. The Taniwha is the icon of Maori culture, for example. A river-based dragon who would be a guardian for many iwi and tribes and warn them of oncoming danger. However, the closer that you got to Europe, the less likely that these dragons were good. I'm totally going to butcher the names here. The Indian dragon Rigveda was a symbol of drought. Rostam was a hero who slew many dragons in Iranian culture, and the chaotic dragon Tiamat, which inspired the D&D character, came from Babylon, modern-day Iraq. African dragons. African dragons aren't represented as much due to the obvious biases of our history that our current world has, but the ones that do exist don't share many consistencies. This is largely because African mythology is a lot more wider than expected. For instance, in Egypt, their equivalent of dragons were more like snakes, such as the Ouroboros or the Serpent of Chaos Apophis. And like their European counterparts over the other side of the Mediterranean Sea, they were often associated with destruction. The Southern African dragon, like the Grootslang, were also snake-like, but this example was less malicious than the Egyptian dragons. It was quite a neutral creature, with a snake-like body and an elephant head. It lived in a cave where it dined on other elephants, who also used to be group slangs. It would never go out to destroy, more so luring things into the cave where it lived, where it would also collect gems and guard the bottomless pit. Meanwhile, in West Africa, snakes are often associated with creation myth, the antithesis of the destructive nature of Egyptian and South African dragons. Dambala is the most important of these, being the Sky Father and the primordial creator of life in Vodan myth. He created the cosmos, shed his skin to create water on Earth, and as whole is seen benevolent as wise. Aida Wedo comes from African voodoo myth as well, who in some stories is married to Dambala, who created canyons, valleys, and mountains, another creation myth snake. The variants of the dragons and the large serpents in myth that we see across Africa honestly make sense. It's a huge continent, and too often we generalize the cultures of Africa into one. After looking at these dragons alone, it does inspire me to look more at African myth as a whole. If you have any recs for African mythology retellings, please put them in the comments for me actually. American dragons. No, I'm not talking about Jake Long. The closest native North Americans had to a dragon was the horned serpent. Like the Chinese dragon, it was associated with water and weather, and it had different names and different perspectives based on the tribe. The Muskogee people considered the horned serpent to be benevolent, while the Sioux tribe, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, considered them dangerous. The Sioux tribe also believed that snakes and lizards were descended from the horned serpent. South American dragons, much like the Hydra of Greek myth, were depicted often with multiple heads. Teju Jaguar from Paraguay had 7 dog heads, for example. Or the Incan dragon Amaru had many heads of many animals and a very chimera-like body. There is also no trend in my research across South American dragons as to whether they were more benevolent or more malevolent. Also, you may notice how across the world we see all these depictions of dragons, but they have always looked so different. While it does explain why we're seeing them so much now, it doesn't explain why they popped up so much everywhere, having one similarity above all else. Large snake. Why do dragons look like that? While dragons do remain inconsistent across cultures, there have been some similarities between them. They are depicted reptilian, at least a little bit. They look like snakes or have etymology tied to snakes, and they are large creatures. You know what's a large reptile that actually existed? It's everybody's favorite gender-neutral special interest as a kid. Dinosaurs. Many scholars have argued that different stories of dragons came from the discovery of dinosaur bones and dinosaur fossils across the world. Most particularly though on the Eurasian continent, where dragons are most strongly depicted in their cultures. This explains both the similarities and the differences between these two cultures. Some dinosaurs had long necks, some had wings, some had little hands attached to their wings, and some were more snake-like compared to others. Many Asian dinosaurs look longer in length, while European dinosaurs have the arched spine and the shorter necks that we see in European dragons. Other scholars argue that these were simply just exaggerations of existing reptiles. It makes sense with African dragons being based off snakes largely, and the Groot slang, for example, explaining how elephants and snakes came into existence. However, dragon appearances today seem to be going in two directions. Europe depiction or Asia depiction, which makes sense because these two continents, or like roots of colonization, have the largest global presence, including in the media. However, not all European dragons seem to be bad anymore. We can train them, we can ride them, we can be a donkey and have sex with them. Regardless, the diverse way that dragons have been represented means that we will be not running out of dragon-related content anytime soon. And I have learned to stop hating dragons slowly because of how diverse I now recognize them to be. Hell, I might even include dragons in my novels going forward. I bet me 4 years ago wouldn't have said that. And while they're fun, they will still not be my favorite characters in mythology. I will always be a fairy kid. So stick around for when I make a video on fairies, and for when I write dragons into my novels, and make more videos on the creatures that you know and love, thanks to the help of Biv, Hoarder of Creatures.
You still have much to learn, but you have done well so far, Amy.
Thank you, Biv. And with that, I shall see you in another world.